Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke Beppu. How are you doing? Today, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to you about the Criterion Collection and specifically how I got into the Criterion Collection and what my philosophy or my collecting habits are with respect to collecting the Criterion Collection. I received a number of comments from a number of different viewers asking me or suggesting to me that I should do a video regarding my approach to collecting the Criterion Collection and also how I got into collecting the Criterion Collection very seriously. As some of you may know, I am very fortunate and lucky to be able to say that I have been able to collect all of the spine numbers in the Criterion Collection, as well as the non-spine numbered releases from the Criterion Collection. So the Eclipse series and the, let's see what else, the Merchant Ivory DVDs, the Kurosawa box set, the Essential Art House releases, and the Rialto box set, and also the, of course, and the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs too. I'm very fortunate to be able to say that I have all of the known Criterion Collection Laserdisc releases, and all but 2 of the Voyager Laserdisc releases. So I'm very fortunate and I'm very lucky to be able to say that that my collection is of this extent. But I wasn't always like this, and in fact I became complete, so to speak, only very recently. In fact, it was only this past June when I became Laserdisc complete, and that was after a collecting phase, a serious collecting phase of some years, in fact. And my Criterion Collection DVD and Blu-ray collecting completeness also came about around the same time. So it was June was a very happy month, I would say, or May, June, something like that. So let's see. Yes. So what I'd like to do is I just like to talk to you very quickly, or maybe not so quickly, about my collecting habits and how I started to get into Criterion Collection collecting seriously and in earnest, and what my view is of my own collecting. So the first question is, how did I get into the Criterion Collection collecting? So this is a pretty interesting question, but it's not really, my answer isn't as interesting as the question, I'm afraid. I got into the Criterion Collection fairly early on, I would say. I was in college when the DVDs were first released. I remember that. I remember the excitement in the air when the first round of DVDs were released by the Criterion Collection. And this was around the time when DVDs just suddenly emerged in the marketplace. Up to then, it was always VHS and Laserdisc. Incidentally, when I was growing up, I didn't have any Laserdiscs, and I didn't have a Laserdisc player because Laserdiscs were far too expensive for me and my family at the time. So I only became exposed to Laserdiscs very seriously when I entered college, because my college had a really nice VHS and Laserdisc library, an archive, and included in that archive were in fact many Criterion Collection Laserdiscs. I remember my boss at that, I was working part-time at that video movie archive actually, and I remember my boss always got a thrill when he was showing me the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs, and it was a real technical feat at the time. It was a real wonderful thing because commentaries were very new. You know, we didn't have commentaries on VHS tapes, so to have a commentary with a film on these beautiful Laserdiscs was really quite the thing indeed. So, and then it was around this time when I was in college, you know, maybe I was a freshman or sophomore, maybe I was a junior perhaps, I don't quite remember, but this was around the time when DVDs emerged in earnest and we started to get more DVDs into the video and film archive at my college. And included in those were Criterion DVDs, of course. So I would be getting these, or I would be holding these DVDs from Criterion, and it would be a really wonderful thing. So when the DVDs started to come out, this is when I too started to make my purchases of some of these DVDs. I wasn't collecting all of them at the time, but I remember I was buying some, and even afterwards, I was still buying them. So this is the start of my little collection. And I remember getting films like I got Hard Boiled, and I got The Killer, and I got some others. But I wasn't a real intense collector. I was just getting some films that I liked, and then that would be the end of it. And this was the DVD phase. And I was still a college student, so I didn't have much money to spend. And these were very expensive. You know, these were maybe sometimes maybe $40 or maybe more even. So I wouldn't always be able to buy as many as I would like. So it was quite a thing to buy a Criterion Collection DVD at the time, as I recall. So that was the start. And as I got older, as I left college and moved to Japan and started work, you know, Criterion and well, my relationship with the Criterion Collection more or less was that of a casual viewer. And occasionally I would buy discs, and occasionally I would not. And I remember at the time that I would always be focusing on Japanese films. And I think that was because, you know, I'm Japanese, so maybe I have this affinity towards Japanese films. I'm not necessarily a Japanese film expert, but I do have an affinity for Japanese films. So that was probably the reason why I tended to gravitate towards the Japanese film releases of the Criterion Collection. So this, for example, compelled me to buy the Teshigahara set, the DVD set, you know, which has Pitfall and Face of Another and Woman in the Dunes, which is now OOP. So I got that when it was first released. So my copy is a bit faded, and you know, it's supposed to be a pristine white, but mine is a little bit faded, so it's a bit of a beige, grayish beige. So that's a bit of a shame. But anyway, so I got that, and I got other films. I got the Ozu Eclipse sets, and I got the Kurosawa DVDs, the ones that were available, and you know, I also got other DVDs as well at the time. You know, I remember getting Mishima when it was first released on DVD. You know, that glorious grotesque gold cover, which still exists. It's wonderful. And so that was more or less the continuation of my casual connection with the Criterion Collection. So I wouldn't get all of the releases, but I would get some very casually, and then that would be it. And then around, I would say, maybe several years ago, there was that time when, do you remember, there was the announcement that happened when the Criterion Collection announced that there would be a number of titles that would be going out of print because of those titles having a relationship with Studio Canal. So these are titles like Grand Illusion. I remember Grand Illusion, there was the announcement that was, it's going to go out of print, so you better buy these immediately. And so I remember reading that, and I remember being quite affected by this announcement, which happened several years ago. And ever since then, there have been titles that have become out of print. So I remember trying to get as many of those titles as I could. And I was able to, but I wasn't able to get all of them. And so that was the start, I think, of kind of an urgency that I began to feel towards wanting to collect all of these films. And that was a start. But still, I was, at the time, I remember I wasn't necessarily in position yet with respect to my own job to have enough disposable income to be able to spend the money to buy all the films that I wanted to, because this is a very expensive venture. It costs quite a bit of money to invest in these discs, So I still wasn't collecting everything at the time. But then there came a point, I think it was maybe it was around 5 years ago or so, when I was a little bit more secure with my own job, and I was a bit more, I had a little bit more steady income. And I still had I had a family at the time, of course, but I was able to support them relatively well. And so, and my wife very generously agreed to allow me to spend a little bit of my disposable income towards this hobby, which is collecting movies. And then I thought to myself, if I'm going to collect movies, well, let me just step back a bit and just explain why I decided to collect movies. And the reason, I think, was I'm not interested in cars, I'm not interested in many things, but as I explained in a video some time back about how I got into film, film has been a very important aspect of my life. And so I thought, I might as well collect these films, because at the very least I'll be able to have some library of films that I can recall and rely upon and look back on and review and revisit, and that might help me and my own sort of amateur education in film. And then I thought, well, in that case, what field or what area or what label should I focus on? Because I can't just collect everything willy-nilly. That would be impossible, both financially and physically speaking. So I thought, well, I think the best way for me to restrict myself, in a manner of speaking, would be to focus on, let's say, a single label. And I thought, what better label to focus my attention on than the Criterion Collection? And I said to myself, there is no better label. The Criterion Collection is the creme de la creme. So that was the start of my serious collecting of the Criterion Collection. And then from then on, I was slowly but surely trying to get as many titles as I could. Now, there were a few issues that came up. So one issue being that around the same time, I became seriously interested in collecting the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs as well. And it was very difficult to devote attention on the Laserdiscs and then attention on the DVDs and Blu-rays at the same time. I found that I would spend, let's say, a few months focusing solely on trying to collect DVDs and Blu-rays, and then after that period was over, I'd spend maybe a month or so, focusing only on the Laserdiscs. And then when that period was over, then I'd return to DVD and Blu-ray collecting, and then back to the Laserdisc collecting. And that back and forth would repeat itself as time went on. And that's for no reason other than my own maybe idiosyncratic thinking. You know, my thinking is of a nature that I can't necessarily focus on many aspects of collecting, if you can believe that. I tend to be more focused driven on one particular aspect of collecting and then trying to get as much as I can within a certain period of time. And then when I grow a little bit tired of it, or when I'm a little bit fatigued, then I'll switch gears and focus on a different aspect of collecting, and that way it'll keep me maybe engaged in the task at hand. So that was how I started collecting both Laserdiscs and the DVDs and Blu-rays. I would just go back and forth with respect to my focus. And that continued for a few years until we reached this year and this past June, when I was able to call myself complete in both areas. But that was one issue that I faced. Another issue that I faced, of course, was the fact that there were many titles that I still had, that I didn't have, that were out of print. Now, I was very fortunate in my early purchasing choices. You know, as I said, when I was younger, I had decided to get the Teshigahara set, for example, so I was able to get that before that fell out of print. So I was very lucky in that respect. I was also very lucky in that I got the Blu-rays of Pierre Le Fou, and I got one Blu-ray of The Third Man and The Man Who Fell to Earth, and did I get Last Year Myriad? No, I didn't get Last Year Myriad. I didn't get that, but I did get Man Who Fell to Earth, and I got the plastic case, the Scanovo case, Third Man, when they were first released. So I was very fortunate in that respect. But there were some other titles that fell out of print that I didn't have, that I needed to acquire. So that took a little bit of hunting and a little bit of, a little bit of patience, I would say, with respect to the DVDs and Blu-rays. I had much more of an issue hunting down the very hard to find items with respect to the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs. Maybe I'll talk about that in another video, because that is a story in and of itself, actually. There were some items in my Criterion Collection Laserdiscs that were incredibly hard to find, but I was very fortunate in my Criterion Laserdisc hunting. But anyway, that was so that was the Laserdisc side of it. But the DVD Blu-ray side of things was such that I still needed to find certain out-of-print releases. So slowly but surely, I was able to hunt those down, and I was able to find them. Sometimes they would be reasonably priced, other times they would not. And so with respect to those items that were priced rather expensively, I would tend to wait. But I think I don't want to mention any numbers, but I think I did remember spending quite a bit of money, for example, trying to get the Blu-ray of Last Year at Marienbad. But once I settled down and I fell into a little bit of a rhythm, and I generally knew the amount, the scope of my own personal budget that I could spend within, let's say, a given month, then I tended to make fairly regular purchases of, maybe a certain limited quantity, and that would continue over the course of months until I was able to, at last, get everything up to, yeah, I'm just waiting right now for the Tree of Life to come. And now I'm in the position where I tend to put my orders through Amazon. So I pre-order things now through Amazon. So I have put in my pre-orders at this point in time for titles up to, I think, The Magnificent Ambersons and what was that? Magnificent Ambersons and Some Like It Hot, the November releases, right? I'm sorry, not the November releases, the November releases. And I also put in my pre-order for the Bergman box set through Amazon. Okay, so that is just my general history with respect to collecting the Criterion Collection. Okay, so now, what is my approach to collecting? So specifically, what is my philosophy towards collecting? Okay, so it's pretty, it's pretty idiosyncratic. Well, I think it's not so complicated, but maybe other people might think that I'm being a bit too idiosyncratic. So if you think that way, I sincerely apologize. I don't mean to be idiosyncratic. I'm just trying to just show you what my approach is. So, okay, so the first issue is the logo. So let me just show you what I mean. So as some of you may know, the Criterion Collection over time has changed its logo as it appears on the covers of these releases. So for the first 50 spine numbers or so, the logo would be this black bar across the top here with the Criterion Collection in all caps white lettering. So this would be the general logo for the early releases, the first 50. And then after after the first 50 or so, then the Criterion Collection logo changed, right? So for example, let me pull this one. Here we go. Okay, so this is, oh, no, that's, okay. So for example, the logo changed to this line, and then the Criterion Collection appears sort of off-center, right? So this line logo emerged. And then from about the mid-300s, the logo changed again. And so the logo suddenly became this C logo, which is, as of this video, the current logo. Okay, so we have these three logos, or the way that the Criterion Collection logo appears on the cover, right? So we've got the black bar, and we've got the line logo, and then we have the C logo. Okay. So my philosophy, first of all, is to go through, and if there is a title that has been released with, let's say, the black bar, I will seek to get the black bar release. And then if the same title has a subsequent release with the line logo, then I will seek to also get the line logo release. So for example, the 400 Blows. The 400 Blows was released on DVD with this black bar logo. Okay, so I have this DVD, and I open it up, and there's the DVD inside. Okay. Then later, sometime later, it was released again, except this time it was released with a line. And so I got this one, which is the line logo of the 400 Blows. And as you can see, the cover is also a little bit different. So this is pretty interesting. Okay, the spine numbers are the same, of course. Spine number's 5, but already we have differences in logo, and coincidentally, we also have differences in the cover design. This isn't always the case, but with respect to the 400 Blows, we have a new logo with the subsequent release. Okay, and then later, the Blu-ray was released. And so I ended up getting the Blu-ray. Now this is the dual format release, and as you can see, it has the C at the corner. Okay, so I have this. And I also, incidentally, have the Digipack release, the Blu-ray only Digipack release as well. And I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So that is my general approach with respect to logos. So if a title has been released many times but under different logos, I will seek to get all of the releases. In other words, if there is a black bar release, black bar Criterion Collection logo release, I will get that. And then if there's a line logo release, I will get that. If there's a Wacky C release, I will get that as well. So if there have been releases with different logo appearances, even if the cover is the same, I will get that. So for example, an example of the cover being the same would be, for instance, here, Wild Strawberries. Okay, Wild Strawberries was released with this line for the DVD, so I have this, and then it was released subsequently on Blu-ray with the C, so I will get that as well. And the covers are the same, but I am rather idiosyncratic that way, I suppose. Okay. The next thing is, as some of you know, when the Blu-rays are released, there are also DVDs of the same title that are released, and this is true. For example, if you have the Blu-ray with the C logo, you'll have a DVD release also with the C logo. Now, if that's the case, usually what I'll do is I won't get the DVD, but I'll only get the Blu-ray. However, I do sometimes make exceptions to that rule. So, for example, if I know that there's a Blu-ray release of a film and there's a DVD release of a film, if I know, for example, that, let's say, there are certain issues with the Blu-ray presentation, or maybe there have been reviews that suggest that the DVD presentation is maybe of superior quality. I mean, this is all relative and this is all subjective, I understand, but perhaps there might be some issue with respect to the Blu-ray, which might make some people think that the DVD equivalent is superior. In that case, I will usually opt for getting both. Okay. So for example, The Earrings of Madame de. Okay. This is the DVD, and this is the Blu-ray. Now, as you can see, in terms of cover design, there is practically no difference between the two. There is, of course, a little bit of size difference, the DVD being a little bit bigger in dimension, but that goes without saying. The backs, too, tend to be almost identical. Okay. However, the DVD is said to have, let's say, a certain picture quality that some people think is a little bit more preferable than the Blu-ray picture quality. Now, I tend to think that the DVD is a little bit more, well, how should I put it? I tend to visit the DVD of this when I visit this film. So it's good to have both the DVD and the Blu-ray. Then there are the Blu-rays and the DVDs, wherein for example, the DVD release and the Blu-ray release will be identical in terms of cover art, but for example, the DVD will be, let's say, a digipack. Okay, so what I will do is I might decide, therefore, I might get the Blu-ray, and then I also might want to get the Digipack. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So for example, okay, here is the Blu-ray of Last Year at Marienbad. Now this is a Digipack Blu-ray. There's also a Digipack DVD. And I wasn't always like this, but recently I decided that I wanted to get as many Digipacks as I could. So I thought, if this is offered in a Digipack, the DVD, if the DVD is offered in a Digipack, I thought I want to get the DVD Digipack as well as the Blu-ray Digipack. Incidentally, I'm also peculiar in that I insist also on getting the plastic case release of the Blu-ray of Last Year at Marienbad. So this means I have the plastic Blu-ray case with the disc inside. Then I have the Blu-ray Digipack release, and I won't pull it out, but this also has the Blu-ray inside. And then here is the DVD Digipack release. Okay. The same is true for example, Salo. So for Salo, for example, here is the old DVD that I was talking about earlier. This has the black bar logo across the top, this being spine number 17. Then here is the Blu-ray of Salo, which I got. Notice the C in the corner. But then I also got the Digipack DVD, which I haven't opened yet. But there you go. So I'm also into getting the Digipack release where that is possible. Next, I also insist on getting the dual format releases of the films. I was and still am a supporter and admirer of dual format releases. So I have all of the dual format releases of the films. And then subsequently, if there have been Blu-ray replacements of that, I'll also try to get the Blu-ray only release as well. So what do I mean by that? So for example, one I showed earlier, the 400 Blows. This is the dual format release. As you can see, the two discs are housed like so inside this. And then I also have the Blu-ray only Digipack. Okay, so that's one example. Another example, let's see. Let's see. Oh yes. Another example is Breathless. Here is Breathless Blu-ray. This is the dual format release. And then here is the Blu-ray only release. So there is a considerable difference in terms of thickness. And that is true for the other the other dual format releases that have subsequently become Blu-ray only releases. I'll try to get the Blu-ray only releases as well where I can. Next, where there is a booklet or some kind of maybe thick book that has been released with a title, I will also try to get that particular release as well. For example, the film The Man Who Fell to Earth was released. This is spine number 304. Now, let me just show you very quickly what I have. So I have the Blu-ray. This is the plastic case Blu-ray. Okay. Then I also have this one, which is the Digipack Blu-ray. So if we open this up, we can see that it is voila, a digipack. Okay. But as some of you may know, The Man Who Fell to Earth was also, or it was also a DVD release, but the DVD release was very special because it included the novel by Walter Tevis. So here it is. This is the DVD release of The Man Who Fell to Earth. And indeed, you've got the DVD in here. And then you have also something very neat, which is the novel. So I wanted to get this release because of the fact that the novel was included. Here's another example. Okay, here is the Blu-ray of Shortcuts. Notice the C at the corner. I also have the DVD of Shortcuts. I have this for two reasons. The first reason being that this has the line logo across the top, so that makes me want to get it because it is a little bit different than the C logo. And then also it has the book of short stories, the Raymond Carver short stories. And here it is, Shortcuts. Okay. And then this is the DVD that is housed with that. And this is a nice little digipack, okay, a multi-disc release. So those two are just examples of where I will try to get the release that has a booklet, if there is a release that has a booklet. So, for example, with Shortcuts, only the DVD has the booklet. The Blu-ray, unfortunately, does not. The same is true for The Man Who Fell to Earth. So I will try to get the DVD equivalents if the DVD includes a book and the Blu-ray doesn't. The next item that I collect is I'll try to collect those releases where the spine number, or how to explain it. Sometimes there are releases on DVD where, let's say, a film has its own spine number when it's released on a DVD, but when the film is then subsequently released on Blu-ray, that maybe one of the spine numbered DVDs will merge with one of the Blu-ray titles. So therefore, a spine number will disappear when it turns into a Blu-ray. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Okay. For example, this is the John Cassavetes 5 films box set. And the box set has these films when it's in DVD format. So Shadows, 251, Faces, 252, A Woman Under the Influence, 253, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, 254, Opening Night, 255, and A Constant Forge, which is 256. Okay, so this film, A Constant Forge, which is a long documentary about John Cassavetes, has its own spine number release when it comes to the DVD release of this box set. However, when you have the same box set but in Blu-ray format, something interesting happens. All the feature films are the same. So Shadows, Faces, A Woman Under the Influence, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and Opening Night. However, the documentary, A Constant Forge, does not appear in its own separate Blu-ray case, unfortunately. So what happened to it? It merged with, I think it's with, yes, it is actually featured as a supplement to the Blu-ray of Shadows. So therefore you have spine number 256 appearing as a supplement to Shadows. And to make it a little bit more frustrating, the spine number that appears on Shadows is only 251. In other words, the spine number for A Constant Forge, which has now merged into this Blu-ray, does not appear. on the spine. So the spine number for a constant forge, which is spine number 256, which appears in the DVD box, does not appear in the Blu-ray box. So that compelled me to want to get the DVD version of the John Cassavetes 5 Films box set. Now, I hope, well, let's see. This doesn't necessarily mean that I seek to hoard or get as many titles, let's say, of the same release as possible. I know some of you have noticed, for example, on my shelves, for instance, someone asked me, why do I have 2 copies of Stray Dog? I'm sorry, not Stray Dogs, Straw Dogs, excuse me. Why do I have 2 copies of Straw Dogs? There's a simple reason for this. The reason why I have 2 copies of Straw Dogs is simply because I had to get this after the fact. It was OOP, out of print, when I got it. It wasn't that expensive, but I had to get them on eBay. And so when I got my 1 copy, I was very happy to receive it, but unfortunately, I realized that when I opened it, there was no booklet. So I was a little bit annoyed by that, that situation. But I thought, I was at the point where I couldn't necessarily return it because I was already back in Japan, and the physical logistics of returning was a bit more cumbersome than just keeping it. So I decided to keep it and order a new one, and I made sure that the new one that I got had the booklet, and it does here. So that's the reason why I have 2 copies of Straw Dogs. I don't usually do that. In other words, I don't usually like to get, I don't like to hoard things unless I do find, let's say, a deal that's just too good to pass up. Let's see. There were a couple occasions where that happened. So for example, I was able to get my hands on 2 copies of the Carlos Saura trilogy, flamenco trilogy, the clip set, which is now OOP. And I was able to find a cheap copy of this on Yahoo Auction, which is a Japanese auction site. And I was able to find it for the extraordinarily low price of, it would have been the equivalent of about $15 or $20. So when I saw that, I just thought, I can't pass this up. So I have to, I ordered it, or I bid on it, and I won the bid. So I won the auction, and so I was able to get a second copy of this for, about $20. So that was quite a bargain. So sometimes there are some benefits to living in Japan, because sometimes you are able to find bargains here. Not all the time, but sometimes you're able to find good bargains. Oh, I should mention also that another quirk of collecting is living in Japan, because living in Japan has its benefits and its disadvantages. Sometimes there are advantages, for example, the one I mentioned before. Sometimes you are able to find a really expensive OOP title for really cheap. So that's not always the case, but once in a while you're able to find it. I know a friend of mine, for example, he's found the Digipack Blu-ray of Chungking Express for, I think it was the equivalent of $20 US. So he's my friend who lives in Tokyo. So that's just another great example of bargains that you can find. The disadvantages, of course, to collecting Criterion while living in Japan are quite many. For example, the Criterion Collection website online shop does not ship to Japan. So this means then that I am not able to take advantage, for example, of the Criterion Collection flash sale. I'm not able to make any purchases directly through the Criterion Collection website, which means that I don't have any of the mugs, I don't have any of the t-shirts, I don't have any of the posters. I'd love to have a t-shirt, but unfortunately I just can't order them through the online shop. And as far as I can tell, I haven't been able, maybe I can find them on eBay or maybe through Amazon, I don't know, but I'm just not, maybe I'm too lazy to make an effort to do that. But anyway, yes, the Criterion Collection website shop does not ship directly to Japan. Another issue, of course, is their shipping, because shipping is, it costs to ship across the ocean, from the United States to Japan. Sometimes shipping can be relatively cheap, other times it can be not so cheap. So you just have to be a little bit careful with respect to shipping. Yet another issue with respect to that is quite often actually, items will come and they might be a little bit damaged or a little bit maybe weathered. So for example, maybe there might be a new disc that I'll get, but it might have a little bit of a tear on a corner, or it might have a little bit of a puncture in the casing. Yeah, so for example, when I ordered the Blu-ray of The Night Porter, I got this, which is the Blu-ray of The Night Porter. But if you look, for example, very closely, you'll see that the spine was damaged. And so I got this, which is a damaged spine. And if you open the case, you can see that the inside is actually cracked. Okay, the disc is fine, but the inside was a little bit cracked, and there's a little bit of damage to the spine. But it's a little bit cumbersome to return them, and I don't necessarily. And I thought, I can still watch the film, so I have this, which is a little bit damaged, but I was able, subsequently to get my hands on a pristine release of this. This is when I was in Hawaii, and I ran across this in the local Barnes & Noble, so I ended up getting that while I was in Hawaii, so that was nice. But this is just an example of the kinds of things that one can expect to occur. That's just one of the things that happens when you have overseas shipments. So I tend to expect that shipments there's the possibility that a shipment can be damaged. And if there's light damage, then I won't worry about it. But if there is extreme damage, then I will usually return the item, and it just takes more time to get a replacement and all that. So it's a little bit cumbersome to have to deal with that when you're dealing with overseas transactions. But these are just I can't complain, because this is just that's just the nature of the society that we live in. So and I'm perfectly understanding of that point. So usually what that means is that I'll usually be I tend to be forgiving when it comes to a little bit of damage. Of course, I did have some pretty severely damaged items that have come in. Not everything, but maybe once in a while I'll have something that is just completely destroyed, and I'll have to get my money back and get a full refund. So it didn't happen with a DVD, but for example, I have this. This is a Laserdisc, and this is a Laserdisc of the film Taxi Driver, and it arrived just cracked, and because the Laserdisc was not at all wrapped appropriately. It was just in a cardboard box, and it looked like someone just sat on the box. So it arrived just cracked. so I was just devastated. I ended up getting my a full refund on this, fortunately, and subsequently I was able to replace to find the exact same copy of this Laserdisc, and then so now I have the Laserdisc, a non-damaged one, back on my shelves over there. But I keep this as a little bit of a souvenir to remind me of the trials and tribulations of ordering online and having things shipped from the United States to Japan. Okay, so I'm sorry to have kept you this long. Those are just some of my approaches and viewpoints and background with respect to collecting the Criterion Collection. Do you have any questions, or do you have any comments, or maybe do you have any stories or any philosophy or philosophical approaches towards collecting that you'd like to share with me? If so, I'd like to hear it, and please maybe leave a comment below and let me know what your story is, or what your question is, or what your comment is. I would really love to hear your story or your question. And I really love to talk about Criterion Collection collecting. I think it's a lot of fun, and there are a lot of aspects to it that are pretty interesting. I mean, there are some details in the collection that I didn't go into, but there are some quirky aspects to collecting, I must say. And this is not at all I haven't spoken at all in detail about the Laserdiscs. That I'll leave for another video, but the Laserdisc collecting is a different beast. It's quite interesting, and it was sometimes perilous, but always fascinating. So if any of you out there are interested in collecting Laserdiscs, maybe I'll try to make a video. But in the meantime, if you have questions about that as well, please feel free to ask me anytime. I'll try to answer all the questions to the extent that I'm able. Okay, so with that in mind, I'd like to say thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Cheers.